We had low growth pre-Brexit, right? Growth was continually low the entirety of throughout the austerity period, even before Brexit happened. But obviously we can't do that because nationalisation is communism now. Actually, if you look at polling that's being done right now, people actually are more likely to want a migration to start picking back up. I'm kind of sick of this. Do you know that XYZ profession is now using food banks? I don't care. If anyone is being forced to use food banks, we have failed. This is a Byline TV debate that they've got going about the Tory chaos not really being over. Well, at least they understand that there's a difference between looking as though you're prime ministerial and actually being prime ministerial, rather than the kind of the nonsense we're getting from all the other centrist pundits. Which, to be fair to Byline TV, right? The Byline Times, they may be incredibly tedious liberal guff, right? But at least it is based in some level of understanding of politics, unlike the rest of the centrist commentator sphere. So you might get some reasonable commentary. And plus, it's a debate format, so we're going to be hearing multiple viewpoints. Should be at least some interesting content, so let's watch.
In 2019, Boris Johnson won a general election with the biggest Conservative majority in 3 decades. In September,
they got like 100k subscribers and they're only streaming in what, 780p?
Liz Truss became Prime Minister after winning just 81,000 votes from Tory members. And today, Rishi Sunak has become Prime Minister by winning just under 200 votes from MPs and not a single member of the public. He's inherited a bruised party that has limped through a period marked by economic catastrophe, political turmoil, and an air of general chaos. Boris Johnson promised, or threatened, depending how you look at it, to return, but ultimately failed to reclaim the position his own party wrestled from him just 3.5 months ago. So now we've had 3 prime ministers in 4 months. But does the revolving door end here? Conservative former...
Yeah, Byline's definitely the least bad of the libs. Like, as much as Peter Jukes has, like, permanent McCarthy brain, right? He permanently, like, sees either Russian or, like, Trotskyist round the corner at every single turn. You remember the moment in The Simpsons where Lionel Hutz is sleeping on the sofa, is like, don't touch my stuff. Hey, wait a minute. This isn't the YMCA. Where it's like, well, it's him, but it's just like jumping up, thinking, this isn't a communist and/or Russian bot. Very Paul Mason style, right? But as far as their actual content is concerned, it's usually pretty good in the kind of deep dives that they do, and the kind of the journalism is at least independent, and they do good work in investigative reporting, right? So I don't agree with their political ideology. I think a lot of the things that they will tweet out and say publicly about, especially about the left, are incredibly cringe. But as far as liberal outlets go, the way in which they tackle issues is far more, dare I say, adult than a bunch of other commentators who treat, politics like a soap opera.
Minister Victoria Atkins said no one in the party is proud of the last 6 weeks, but that now they will unite behind Rishi Sunak. But will they? And is that it? With the Tories still returning dismal poll results and Labour still way ahead, can Rishi Sunak really stave off the collapse of the Conservative Party and, more importantly, the country? And that's what we're here to discuss tonight on The Table, a new discussion show from Byline TV where we aim to have productive conversations about the issues that matter. At this table, we're getting straight to the heart of the issues. There's no hiding behind soundbites, and we'll be exploring the cultural and philosophical underpinnings behind our positions. So I'm thrilled to be joined at the table tonight by veteran journalist John Sweeney, analyst, commentator and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albi Amankona, former Labour MP and leader of the Labour group on Kensington and Chelsea Council, Emma Dent-Coad, and Talk TV host Christo Fufas.
Fucking hell, they got Emma Dent-Coad. Okay, wow, they got an actual leftoid on. Well, it's crazy how when you have like an independent media outlet, we have a proper range of people for across the political spectrum. That's some crazy shit. Wow. Would you look at that? You're absolutely right, Iron Mage. They definitely the least bad of the libs. They're absolutely trying. Because you'd never see someone like Emma Dent-Coad be given any kind of platform on any other kind of these channels, right?
So, let's get into it. Albi, I'm going to start with you. Is Rishi Sunak the answer to the country's prayers?
I think Rishi Sunak is going to make an excellent leader of the Conservative Party and an excellent Prime Minister. I'm personally quite pleased because it's the first time that a leadership hopeful that I've backed has ever actually become the leader of the party. So
because no one else managed to get the nominations. It's not like anybody voted for him.
Change is going to come. But look, I agree with Victoria Atkins. No Conservative is proud of what's happened over the last 6 weeks. to be blunt, it's been a complete disaster. The mini budget went too hard and too fast. We spooked the markets with a combination of the tens of billions of pounds to be spent on unfunded tax cuts, and also, of course, the hundreds of billions of pounds being spent on the energy support scheme, which is being put in. So both of those measures together spooked the markets and led to us being in this awful situation which we are now in. Rishi Sunak predicted that would cause the markets to get spooked, the gilt yields to deteriorate, and this general economic malaise that we have seen. But one thing where I think Liz Truss was actually right is that she diagnosed the economic problems of the UK correctly. We have had sluggish growth for far too long. We do need to get that growth rate back up. Perhaps the way she went about it was wrong, but the diagnosis was right. And now I think it is up to...
Yeah, I think ever since the, I'm literally a communist, you idiot moment, I think a lot of people kind of thought that they would bring Ash Sarkar on because she's like good TV, I guess.
Rishi Sunak and also the Labour Party to come up with their plan to fix the broken UK economy.
OK, very interesting. I can see, John, you were raising your eyebrows at Liz Truss's diagnosis of why we haven't growth, and I think perhaps I'll bring you in at this point.
Well, Albie, like, the Conservatives are a fiduciary death cult. I mean, honestly, and the primary massive elephant doing a dump right now in the room is Brexit. We are massively underperforming compared to our European former partners in the European Union. Why is that? It's because they're still in the great European single market and we're outside. And until you fix that problem, the British economy will continue to tank. Quite obviously, Rishi is a smart guy, and also as somebody, I'm sure we all care about this, but it's great that he's come from, he's a brown prime minister. Good on him, as far as that is concerned. And I note that Labour has never done anything like as much in terms of getting women into number 10, and now you've got a brown prime minister. Good. Other than that, he's not addressing the elephant in the room, which is Brexit, which is tanking our economy. It was amazing.
The economy was tanking pre-Brexit. Brexit is not the root cause of all of this. It's obviously neoliberalism. Brexit is obviously a symptom of the austerity years and of the neoliberal policies of the last 4 decades up until now, right? There's an excellent bit in the Loner Box video about immigrants and whether or not they cause wage depression, where somebody who's clearly pro-Brexit in the drama series by Channel 4 about Brexit, I think it was, she doesn't really care about whether or not Brexit has any particular political implications, but just likes someone feeling complete impotence in the face of a technocratic political class who clearly has left behind huge parts of the UK. I mean, that's why levelling up was a really good policy to be able to bring people over, because they realised that huge swathes of the country are being left behind, or the class divisions in our country are continuing to increase over time. In fact, so much so that we're one of the most equal, if not the most unequal country in Europe at this point. And so there were a lot of people who voted for Brexit on that basis, right? That is a symptom of neoliberalism. Brexit is not good for the economy, 100%. I'm not going to disagree with John Sweeney here that Brexit is bad for the economy. We have a gigantic trade deficit. Access to all of these markets on a tariff-free basis is exactly something that would help stimulate further economic growth. That's true. I'm not saying that isn't true, right? But that isn't the whole story. And again, it's just a symptom and not the underlying cause. We had low growth pre-Brexit, right? Growth was continually low the entirety of throughout the austerity period, even before Brexit happened, right? So, maybe the issue is the austerity and the neoliberalism, and maybe Brexit is only part of the wider issue here. But of course, liberal journalists, they don't care about austerity. They don't care about normal people's lives. All they care about is the political theatre, and Brexit is excellent political theatre. I don't dislike John Sweeney. I think he's a pretty good investigative journalist, but it's the same kind of Observer Guardian-style brain rot regarding Brexit and ignoring the issues that have happened because of austerity and because of neoliberalism, because again, they're all part of the same journalistic clique where these things are unsayable. They say it's Brexit because that's when it started affecting their cheap Spanish and French holidays. Well, exactly, Iron Mage, right? Suddenly there's a queue at passport control on their way to Lyon, and suddenly now there's a huge issue. Right? There's this huge issue because of Brexit. Yeah, there you go. I mean, people were, David Clapson's death happened way before Brexit, but were they talking about that then? Well, not really.
How badly Liz Truss performed in terms of spooking the markets. I mean, when I was little, several thousand years ago, that the Conservatives were the party of sound money. And like, and now they're bonkers.
Well, yeah.
And like, there's a whole
And I've obviously got the entire segment on it, but the idea, this continual lie, this prevailing consensus people have, that somehow the Tories are the party of sound money and fiscal credibility, that's just not true. It's not been true since 1979. The only reason why Margaret Thatcher managed to survive as long as she did is because she managed to use loads of oil money to be able to fund the dole queues that she deliberately created with her managed unemployment kind of policy, right? The Conservatives' government of 2010 to 2016 tanked the growth of the economy that was previously higher under Labour by implementing austerity at a time in which bond yields were hit historic lows, where we could have invested in future infrastructure, like the Labour Party did over in Australia at the time post-global financial crisis, to stimulate the economy. They did the worst. The only thing you're supposed to not do in a recession is cut spending, and they did it because they're idiots, right? They've never been the party of sound money, at least not in the last 40 years or so. That's never been the case. Stop telling this huge lie and start actually dealing with the issues that are at hand. But again, they don't have to care about any of that, because it only started affecting them when it came to Brexit. They didn't see the issue with the austerity cuts, apart from up till now, right? It's only up until now they start saying, well, now that the long hospital waiting times are affecting them, right? It's affecting the issues that they face. Now suddenly it's got to the point where they start caring. Now it's the point where there's the issues with regards to austerity. But it was never the issue in the entirety of the David Cameron period, because these people were all complicit.
Bunch of other sort of social stuff we can talk about, but very, very simply, I spent a lot of my time in Ukraine, and I met some poor woman who was destitute, right in the front of the front line, and the shells were coming in, and I just wanted to give her some money, and she said, "I don't want your money. I'm not talking to you for your money." And I said, "Yes, no, I get this, but it's pounds, and they're the same equivalent as hryvnias." Like, it was a joke. But that's what the Conservatives have done with pound sterling. I mean, don't you feel ashamed?
Hold on.
Well, no, it's tanked.
None of us care about the pound sterling, really and truly. None of us actually care. I mean, if we didn't have such a gigantic trade deficit and manufacturing hadn't been torn apart by this supposedly fiscally conservative, or the Conservative Party of sound money hadn't eviscerated our manufacturing sector, we might actually be able to export more things, thereby take advantage of the low pound. But unfortunately, we can't do that because it's all got rid of as we over-financialised our economy because of neoliberalism.
Do you disagree that Liz Truss's diagnosis of the British economy not growing quickly? Do you think
I think the reason,
absolutely,
I think everything she thinks is fundamentally wrong. To say that you want to stimulate growth when they've spent 12 years not investing in people and skills and infrastructure and hampering wages.
Michael Gove said,
"Oh, it's strange how you never pointed that out 7 years ago.
To borrow money to cut taxes is not conservative."
Look, I didn't support Liz in the last leadership election, so we can have a debate about the past or we can talk about the future. And we actually agree that the British economy needs to grow more quickly. So my point is that Liz Truss's diagnosis that the British economy needs to grow more quickly was the correct one. And prior to Liz Truss coming into power, nobody was talking about economic growth in that way.
The economy needs to grow and I support Brexit. It's an oxymoron.
Of course you can. That's
there was a chap, I don't know if you heard Radio 4, he was some big money man the other day, and he literally said, if we do not rejoin the single market quickly, the IMF are going to have to bail us out. It's that bad. Emma, let's let you get a word in.
Thank you very much. Yes,
I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, I think that's a little bit far-fetched to say we're in need of an IMF bailout. As I said, our debt to GDP ratio isn't really that high. Just do some wealth taxes, get some money back off the super rich. Actually, for the first time, I'm actually going to praise the Labour policy platform here. The tax plan that they've set out at the moment is looking pretty good, where we deal with the issues that divide the taxes between kind of dividends and capital gains with regards to income tax, and how it shouldn't be that you pay more tax for doing actual work than you would for making money out of money. Closing those loopholes, closing non-dom status, making private schools non-charitable so we can tax them on their profits, for example. These are all things that we could be doing to increase the revenue for the Exchequer, right? We could also increase revenue for the Exchequer by having publicly owned businesses that would be able to put revenue back into the Exchequer from the products that they make and sell. We could do that, but obviously we can't do that because nationalisation is communism now. Communist broadband, for example. We can't do that, given that any amount of nationalisation is now out the window because of how deliberately the media toxified the Corbyn platform, deliberately so, that any amount of left-wing policy platform being proposed in the future could always be compared to Corbynism. And by being compared to Corbynism, you can just call it anti-Semitism or whatever, right? You can just call it crankery. You can just dismiss it outright because it's been attached to the bad man, right? We can't ever have, proper proper policy discussions around the efficacy of nationalisation because it always gets shut down by people saying, well, that's just reheated Corbynism, and that brand is now toxic, right? Which is clever. I mean, it's like Nazi architecture. It's like, it's brilliant, but you can't get away from how absolutely vomit-inducing and disgusting that it is, right? Very clever game that the media did. Try and do that so that we can now have no left-wing discussions about policy, and why Keir Starmer has lurched so far to the right, because he's been, even if he didn't want to, he has been forced to by the media, although we all knew that he actually wanted to, as we've seen, which is very, very frustrating, right? But if we wanted to, quote unquote balance the books, we can just do wealth taxes. We can sequestrate things. There are licenses that we hold in the North Sea for people to do oil drilling. We could just sunset those licenses and then drill it ourselves, a public oil company. These deposits that are being drilled at the moment, they're being drilled by fucking Norwegian and Saudi Arabian oil companies. And so all of the money is being shipped offshore, and we're taking a minimum amount in license fees and in taxes. We could just take control of them using the state, right? We could fucking do a Mossadegh, but we don't want to do that because we only have neoliberals in charge, and they don't know anything. They don't care, right, about balancing the books. All they care about is ensuring that their mates get rich.
And I've similarly been worrying about Brexit, the possibility of Brexit for a very, very long time. If you just look at the built environment, the housing building of all kinds, which is one of our biggest employers in this country, so it's very much part of the economy. For years and years, we depended entirely on skilled labour from Eastern Europe. Fantastic, really good workers. They come over here, they do their things, spend some of their money home. But at the same time, we weren't actually thinking long term. Why don't we use those skilled workers to train our own people, our own youth who had no future otherwise, because they they went back. They were starting to go back about 8 years ago with Brexit looming, and they went back in droves. We are now 250,000 skilled workers short in the built environment. We don't have the materials. We don't have the skilled labour. We don't have the expertise in management or anything. And we just left this to the people that we now no longer want working over here. It's just insane. And I don't know who is doing strategic thinking, because nobody thinks strategically. That's what I see. And I do see, for better or worse, previous governments, maybe there were some big brains actually thinking, oh, if we're going to do that, if we're going to cut the tie from Europe, actually, let's just make sure that we can feed people and that we have the materials here and that we can we have factories building semiconductors so that we can, we can
There's
all
no
that
other
tech stuff
European
going.
country that's part of the EU suffering any kind of economic problems.
No, I'm talking about what we have failed to do here. And even with the fuel crisis, we have got rid of all our gas holders and developed the sites. And that was really short-sighted, short-sighted, because we should have had storage backup. There's no strategic thought, and I really don't understand how we get away with it. Well, we haven't got away with it, because we're
True. Couldn't say about that myself.
literally, it's all short-term thinking.
OK, so that said, Rishi Sunak, if we were giving him a chance, he's appointing his cabinet today. I was pretty appalled to see that he put Braverman in. I thought that was a huge error. And it is, we have got Hunt in as Chancellor, which seems sensible. But isn't, Christo, this just reshuffling, as following Emma's point, the same minds and the same ideas and the same values that we've had really sort of continuously for 12 years? Is there going to be anything fresh?
Which has been democratically voted for by the British people, number one. Secondly, as was Brexit. I loathe Brexit. I was a Remainer. I am a Remainer. But I think the point that Albie was making, and I think we've been a bit unfair on him, was that, look, Liz Truss's point about growth needing to happen was that we can complain about Brexit all we like, but we are where we are, and we have to, for want of a better expression, play the cards that we have. And with the cards that we've got to come up with ways in which we can grow the economy. It would be great if we could all say, well, let's forget about Brexit, call it a blip and pretend it never happened. But we can't do that because it was a democratic vote. Once Boris, I agree that there was some grey area.
It's interesting, like, for a Talk TV host, Christo is actually, reasonably level-headed and well-reasoned, right? I mean, it's interesting that he's probably the only Talk TV host that you could bring on a discussion panel like this and not it turning into fucking nonsense, right? Because the rest of Talk TV is just the worst people you'll ever meet. But he seemed, again, and he's 100% correct here. People voted for Brexit. Again, I didn't. I don't like Brexit, neither did he. But the vote was democratic. The vote was democratic. You lose, but every party that stands at election stands to lose a huge amount of their voter base, apart from the Lib Dems, if they go against the mandate that was given to Brexit by the referendum. So it has to be honoured, and that's just a thing that has to happen, unfortunately.
before Boris got into power in 2019 with an overwhelming majority to get Brexit done. He didn't, but that was what people wanted with that majority. So I just feel like going over the Brexit ground isn't helpful. I feel like what we need to do is work with what we have now and try and come up with solutions now.
Is it not linked? Wasn't Liz Truss enabled by the think tanks who were proponents of Brexit? So it's like, if you get in and you're not part of the EU, you can take away regulations and rights and you can do X, Y, and Z. It was sort of part of the ethos.
What rights are being taken away?
Oh.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay. The right of free movement inside
Right, that's
Europe.
not really a human right, though, is it?
No,
I think
but
one of the main reasons that people voted to leave the European Union was they wanted to have better
I can't believe we're already stuck in a bloody Brexit debate.
control of migration. That's not an awful thing to say. We want to end free movement of people and have more control over our migration policy.
They are looking at taking away.
Okay, well, hang on a minute. Maybe, for example, if you wanted economic growth, which everyone on this table, everyone in that debate there, plus myself reacting to it, we all agree that we want more economic growth, then why don't we use the easiest way of getting economic growth, which is increasing the population, which you can do through immigration?
What they've been looking at taking away workers' rights and deregulating.
I mean, that's true, Avery, always. We could join EFTA. Like, we could always just join, like, have some kind of EFTA arrangement with the European Union, right? It would still be fulfilling the mandate of Brexit, and it would protect a bunch of our economic issues that we have to make sure that we're protecting, right? We could just do that. But, you know, both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are both idiots, unfortunately. And Keir Starmer just hasn't got a fucking clue what he's doing. He's too scared, right? Since the second referendum policy that he put forward, he's been spooked by that, saying, well, we can't have any close relationship with Europe at all because it might be perceived to be going back on Brexit, even though it isn't. Because again, Brexit was just yes, no. It was just a binary choice. Do you want to stay in? Do you want to leave? Us leaving and then joining EFTA, that's leaving. That is... You said yes, we're doing the yes, just in a way that is not massively economically damaging. Also, hello, Googie Shilling. Good to have you on stream.
Regulating and deregulating
Right,
planning
well,
regulations.
actually, Gemma, Jacob Rees-Mogg came up with an entire plethora of employment regulations that could change, and Liz Truss actually rejected all of them. Look, we're sat here. You said rights are being taken away.
Yeah.
I asked you which rights are being taken away.
No
one's been able to answer the question. You said free movement to people, which is not a right. In the same sense as the right to protest. That's not to do with the European Union, though, is it? I mean, let's just be very clear. You're trying to link all of the economic problems that Britain is going through at this very moment in time to the European Union, as if no other country in Europe is suffering from inflation or labour shortages
so let me
or
answer.
resource shortages.
Okay, so let me answer that.
It's not a reasonable argument.
It is a reasonable argument because...
Other
Hey, Avery, good to have you on board.
European countries aren't suffering similar or not worse labour shortages or inflation.
The British economy is underperforming compared to our European...
No, it's not.
Yes,
all of the economies of Europe are...
Okay.
I mean, it absolutely is. But it's interesting which economy specifically that's underperforming in comparison to. It's underperforming in comparison to the social democratic countries that we have in Europe, which just seem to be doing pretty well, especially Norway seems to be getting through the energy crisis pretty well. It does help that they nationalised their North Sea oil. Strange how that works, isn't it? Yet the more kind of neoliberal countries are having a really bad time of it. Countries like Italy. It's really strange, isn't it? Wild.
Okay, so
inflation is at 17% in the Czech Republic.
So I stand by what I say. The British economy is underperforming because it's outside the European market. And yes, you can point to various things, what's happening in Czechia, whatever, all of that. It doesn't really matter. The problem is, Liz Truss said we're going for growth, while ignoring the problem of Brexit. Now, when you talk about we've got to play with the cards we've got, no. Let's get a new set of cards.
Is Keir Starmer ignoring the problem of Brexit?
Hold on a second. Let me just develop my thought. I believe that we should repent our decision, which was only a small minority of people. There was a small margin in favour of Brexit. I suspect that dark Russian money paid for the Brexit vote in some way, in the same way they also, dark Russian...
No one cares, John. Nobody fucking cares, right? And you also, as I've mentioned already in the stream up to this point, we really do not have to go back on Brexit because there are other options. We can stay out of the union, but we can still join the single market and or the customs union or EFTA, right? There's all these different options that we can do to minimise the economic damage whilst maintaining the sanctity of the democratic mandate that was given by the referendum result. The Czech Republic and not, France or Germany or, or Denmark or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Help get Donald Trump elected. You may disagree with me, but the thing to do is to repent Brexit, rejoin, and then
at the very
rejoice.
least, rejoin the single market, which was
Yes,
never
and
part
all
of the
that.
deal anyway.
And the problem is our economy will continue to tank until we do that.
Yeah.
And the guy on the Today programme, whose name has suddenly vanished from my Alzheimer's-ridden brain, said exactly the same thing. And an awful lot of people in the money markets around
Got you covered, Iron Mage.
the world say that. So there is a particular trust problem. She's gone, but Rishi Sunak has a continuing problem in that we have exited the world's biggest single market for no good reason. And the moment we get back in, life will become better for us.
It is for a good reason. Again, I can't believe I'm fighting for Brexit because I'm called the biggest Ramona on Talk TV, and how I've lasted on there.
Hello, my name's John Sweeney, and I'm a far bigger Ramona than you are. I'm a rejoiner.
However, one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things we would have to have if we did rejoin the single market would be the free movement of people that comes along with that. Many of the countries that aren't within the EU, that are within the single market, have the free movement of people. Now, I believe, rightly or wrongly, as Albie said, that a massive number of people who voted to leave the EU did so because they wanted an end to free movement of people. So we would be essentially saying the thing you most voted for...
Well, what? Hang on a minute. If we want to have an understanding about the kind of Brexit that we want to do and how people feel about these things, go back and poll people again. Let's have some other kind of plebiscite or whatever around people's issues with regards to Brexit, right? We don't have to rejoin, but if people want to have a look at the single market, then we can do. Actually, if you look at polling that's being done right now, people actually are more likely to want a migration to start picking back up again, and the amount of people who were angry about there being loads of migration has massively dropped. There was an interesting new BBC Politics segment, actually news at 10 last night, talking about how there are factories in Yorkshire that can't staff the factories because there's not enough immigrant labour coming in able to be put into those positions. And that's a huge issue for them. It's also interesting that people's dislike of immigration maps on directly to the amount at which it's talked about by the media. That's just not me guessing based on manufacturing consent. There's literally the studies that will show you that people's perceived issue with immigration is directly proportional to the amount the media talks about it. It's absolutely wild. I don't have the graph to hand, but it's crazy how kind of close linked these things are. Christo is correct in stating there probably was a non-zero number of people who did want to end freedom of movement. But if people go back to it, and then we have a look now and we say, well, actually, looking back at Brexit, we can still do that, but do you want to rejoin the single market so that we can have a look at more freedom of movement so that we can get more of these people in doing all of these jobs that can't be filled at the moment with our current labour force? They'd be like, oh, hey, yeah, brilliant. We might as well change to that. And we can't just... what people were asked one thing, yes or no. We can't take that yes or no vote from what is now 6 years ago and then continually use that as a singular justification for every part of the Brexit deal when it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. We can always have, even if we stick to the mandate that was given by that vote, we can still then do future polls, future discussions, future plebiscites around how we want that deal to go down in future.
In order to get Brexit, we will be reneging on that.
But
So what will that do to trust in democracy?
But they aren't going to get that anyway, because the next trade deal, like with India or whatever, the quid pro quo will be we need workers, and so they'll just come from India. They haven't solved anything.
You cannot run a country's economic policy on fear of immigration alone. And actually all the poll numbers at the moment are in favour of that. People accept that Brexit was a mistake, and the number of people who've got buyer's remorse, it keeps on going up. So the idea that every single part of your economic policy is predicated by fear of the other,
that is not the case, John. Look, the British people voted to leave the European Union in 2016.
By a small margin.
It is not.
Yes, that's true, Cataclysm. Yeah, the Brexit vote was indeed only advisory, right?
Helpful, John, it is not helpful to rehash a discussion about Brexit. Both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, it's not either their policy to have another referendum or to rejoin the European Union.
And they're wrong about that.
The Lib Dems got slaughtered at the 2019 general election.
Okay, but by the way, that's the whole point of being a Lib Dem.
Didn't the 2019 election, didn't the Lib Dems increase their seat count? They got slaughtered at the 2015 election for backing austerity, which this fucker also backs as well.
We need to stop talking about the past.
Slaughter us,
We
but
need
we're
to stop
telling the
talking about
truth.
the past and start talking about the future.
I know, you keep on saying
and rejoin the European Union is not on the agenda.
Oh, it is on the.
Okay,
Hold
now
on.
let's let Emma.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
I'm not so good at shouting over everybody
I
else.
apologise.
That's all right. No, and I feel very strongly what we have at the moment, and we will have in the future, is most of our cabinet members and our prime minister and so on are very, very good at making money out of money. They're not good at making money out of things. They're not good at looking after industry. And I'm an early riser, and I listen to Farming Today, and it's amazing. It's not only amazing because you learn so much, but actually it's also devastating because there are industry after industry of people making food for people to eat here, milk and whatever, or from all over the country. Every single one of them is a natural Tory voter, and their businesses are being utterly destroyed. And I turn it on in the morning. Oh God, it's absolutely depressing. The fishing industry, of course, the Scottish fishing industry is completely destroyed. Yeah. The Cornish fishing industry is destroyed. The farmers growing arable, dairy, they can't get their foodstuffs over. They can't grow. They can't because we have a shortage of nitrogen to fertilise the fields. The endless ramifications of Brexit on this whole industry, which keeps us going, is absolutely terrifying. And none of the people at the top making money out of money, and I'm sure we need some people making money out of money, but I think we should also be making money out of things and feeding people. And actual, you put something in the ground and it grows. That's actually
Not just so fucking based. This sounds like somebody who'll make a really good MP. Don't you think she might make a good MP? It'd be really weird and silly if she was removed from an MP long list because of factional warfare from the Starmabteilung.
amazing. There's nobody who actually understands that, and we do not have the expertise. It's like with the built environment. Where is the expertise? Who are they listening to? They're not listening to the experts.
Well, and on that note, I find it just disconcerting that in our government people can go into roles that are so crucial. Okay, and I understand that Ben Wallace is staying in defence. That's a good thing.
He's a good bloke.
Yeah, he's a good bloke. And also it's continuity, right? Because we've got this terrible war going on. So good, stay, please, you know what you're doing. But this idea, education, it breaks my heart. How many awful people have been in that role, in and out, and schools are facing 9 out of 10 or something aren't going to be able to afford to pay their staff and the energy bills. So my question, bringing it back to what we're supposed to be talking about, Rishi Sunak's kind of like revolving cabinet, how are we supposed to have, as an electorate, trust that someone can go from, I'm going to be a foreign secretary tomorrow, where's the experience? Why should you?
Well, because none of them have any experience of anything. Like, sure, Ben Wallace might have some experience, considering he's been in the army. Fair enough, I buy that. No one's ever had any experience. Doesn't matter really who's in power. Do you really think the fucking Alistair Darling had enough experience to be Chancellor, for example?
Be in that role. Does it not worry you, Christo, that it's just sort of, like I said before, the same minds, same set of people, just swapping jobs?
Well, yeah, but I'm hoping that the person at the top, being someone like Rishi, who seems a little bit more stable than what we've seen over the last few years, will hopefully stamp his authority on what he wants, because let's not forget, the person at the top, we had it with Boris, it does tend, the chaos and disorder tends to trickle down from there. And secondly, I think that this is a really important point regarding how we are where we are. I've noticed Keir Starmer and various other people making real, almost glee. Look at the high inflation. Look at the high interest rates that the Tories have given us. No, actually, interest rates were going up before the chaos of the last 3 prime ministers. No, inflation was going up as.
Oh, but don't you get to Avery always? He's at Jeremy Hunt's the safe pair of hands, the grown-up that's in the room protecting the economy from collapse. He's not indeed the person who went to war with the junior doctors at increased privatisation of the NHS, having written a book on how to privatise the NHS.
As a result of what was happening in Ukraine. Now, have they made mistakes since then with the trust incompetence? Absolutely. But you can't lay every problem that we are facing at the moment at the door of the Tories. It's cost-push inflation. It's external factors that have given us that inflation.
We're in a terrible, terrible situation. And
Yeah,
what
we
interests
are.
me is...
Krista makes a really good point here again, that it is obviously cost-push inflation, which is why the central bank's desire to raise interest rates is absolutely nonsensical. It's ridiculous that they're pushing this interest rate hike, considering that it is exogenous effects that are causing the inflation that we're seeing. It's not a demand issue. It's never been a demand issue. So increasing interest rates will do absolutely nothing other than just put people out of their homes.
that Rishi Sunak, yes, fiscally he's wise, he's experienced and all of that stuff, but he's to me, where's the Where's the compassion, right? So
Furlough, where's the compassion?
Furlough.
He wrote checks for the British public.
Wait a minute, right?
You asked the question.
He did, yes, and I think it's fair because 25 people committed suicide who were excluded out of those 3 million people who were desperate for help. Desperate, and they slipped through, and there was nothing. And they campaigned, and they were talking, whistling into the wind. Thousands of them have terrible depression, and 25 of them took their lives. Okay,
Hospitality completely wiped
yeah.
out.
So yes, he implemented furlough really effectively. It was really quick. It was rolled out well. Okay, I'm not saying the man is clueless or talentless. Clearly, he isn't. But when I talk about compassion, I'm talking about teachers at the moment, you know, who can't afford to eat, nurses, etc. Is he?
Well, you got to think, right? The furlough scheme was something that they were forced into doing. There wasn't a policy platform that they set out in the manifesto, some kind of ideological commitment that they had to ensuring people didn't die during a pandemic. The pandemic happened, and they were like, well, if we let people die, that's going to look really bad and also be really bad. So they were forced into doing it. That's not the same as looking at an actual political ideological platform and saying, we believe in having well-paid teachers. We believe in the right to strike. We believe in making sure that everyone has the right to food, etc., etc., which clearly the Tories don't fucking do. And Rishi doesn't, and none of them have done for ages. In fact, the only Conservative leader who's even shown he even cares about, you know, what people actually on the breadline actually live on, what people at the bottom of the rung actually have to deal with, is Boris Johnson, as I mentioned in my video a couple of days ago.
Going to understand what is needed to help the NHS, what is needed in education, and thing that most people care about, not flipping bankers and bonuses and tax rates. Real politics is people. Is he the man for that job?
Doctors and firefighters going to food banks now. You know, in Kensington, Chelsea was the richest borough in the universe, according to one of the Tories. We have 23 food banks, and they're running out of food already. Winter hasn't even come yet, and people coming in, so I haven't eaten for a couple of days, I had to feed my children. This is very, very real, and it's happening right there in Kensington. Absolutely shocking. Doctors
One of the richest boroughs, supposedly.
Doctors and firefighters, and my God, they need to be fed properly.
And he wasted 15.3
I get why she's saying this, and I get the optics, but I'm kind of sick of this. Do you know that XYZ profession is now using food banks? I don't care. If anyone is being forced to use food banks, we have fucking failed. Our society has failed. Let's start again from scratch, bin this shit, right? Obviously, it's scandalous that it's gotten as far as it has with regards to these professions as well, but the fact that people are only being forced to care about food banks because they feel like it's gone so far enough that now even the worthy people have to use them rather than the previous unworthies who we didn't have to care about before. Oh, no. We have to care about those people too. This should be a point that we make about how far that it's gone, not something to do with, well, now you should care because now it's affecting people that you actually like rather than the poor people you like to belittle and demonize forever.
3 billion by not investigating that COVID fraud. That was companies that didn't exist. You know, there were some serious flaws going on, and it was just
So you were just attacking him for not spending enough money, and now you're attacking him for spending too much money. Look, the point is...
No, it's not about whether you spend the money or not. It's how you spend the fucking money.
Just letting fraud
Look,
guys spend it.
let me finish my point. His argument in favour of the way that he implemented those support schemes was they needed to get into place quickly, and therefore the checks and balances that are usually put in place were not put in place. Now, I personally think that was a bad choice. I'm sure you agree with me. But the point that you initially raised about him not being compassionate, I don't know how you can sit here with a straight face and say Rishi Sunak isn't compassionate.
I asked a question.
Oh yeah, it was huge amounts of compassion that he showed when he was diverting funds away from deprived urban areas to posh constituencies whose votes he wanted to win. Right? I was absolutely incredibly compassionate to his rich golfing mates. Right?
He literally, well, I even asked the question when we all know, when maybe we're beneficiaries of the furlough scheme, this entire country's economy
Every country did a furlough scheme.
would have crumbled. So now are you discrediting that entirely?
No,
you feel that he did a bad job over COVID?
No, I didn't say
you
that.
Think he did a good job over COVID?
Well, if you let me speak.
What
I
do you think?
said he rolled out a very effective, efficient scheme that was rolled out quickly.
Also, I love how, again, it's just it really is a look into kind of the simplicity of the Conservative mindset, where it's just, well, do you think he did a good job? Well, do you think he did a bad job? Well, if there was furlough, well, are you saying that he did a bad job then? Like, hang on a minute, like, no, there can be a nuance to this position. You can look at Rishi Sunak's approaches over COVID and say, we think that furlough was a good thing that he did, right? Whether he was forced into it or not, we think that at least it was done and it was rolled out at least somewhat well. But the contracts that were done were very clearly incredibly corrupt, being doled out to fucking Matt Hancock's mate down the pub. And also all he did with Green Cell Capital and all the public money you could theoretically have siphoned during that kind of scandal with regards to David Cameron's lobbying efforts as well, right? Or all the PPE or all the different stuff like that. Like, we can criticize these bad things whilst also acknowledging the good things, and then come out with an overall picture and say that, you know, there's some nuance to this issue. Whereas Mr. Conservative over here is like, well, you have to pick good or bad. It's a binary choice. Fuck off. Oh God, it's just every single argument with a Conservative I've ever had, it always comes down to this. There's never nuance, and it is always just, you have to come down on one side or the other, and it drives me around the bend. And I'm sure there are plenty of leftoids that are like this as well. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure I've done this too. But something as obvious as this, when she's clearly made points about that she believes there are some good things and some bad things, and he won't even recognise that there might be some nuance to the issue.
So he did a good
and
job
it
over
worked.
COVID.
He did it. It's nuanced. It's nuanced,
Gemma,
right?
the
Something
point-
can
You took the words right out of my mouth.
be lots of
the
things.
point is, your initial question was essentially saying, the premise of the question was he's not compassionate.
Okay,
He is
I'll change the
compassionate.
question. What have the Tories done in the last 12 years for ordinary people?
One of the so many good things the Conservative Party's
List
done.
them.
Yeah, like all of the people using food banks, the 330,000 people who got Robloxed because of austerity. Was that good stuff for ordinary working people or ordinary people out of work, Albie? Was it? Do you think that might have been? Or do you think that might have been monstrous, like class war terrorism that they were doing?
Over the last 12 years, we've got our unemployment rate down to some of the lowest rates.
we haven't got any
that it's ever
workers
been.
here.
It's not because we haven't got any workers.
It's because the NHS have got hundreds of thousands. You're saying the building industry is desperate.
On COVID,
So it's not a good thing.
because they didn't jump on COVID for quick enough. As we know, they didn't jump on COVID quick enough. Every other country was doing it.
You can't blame Rishi for that. You can blame the buffoon that we had before him. I mean, the Randy buffoon wasn't quick enough.
About Tory
I
governments.
want to
and
get
this
back
is
to
the
what
answer.
they've done for ordinary people.
Right, so they lifted the income tax threshold, taking more people out of tax, and now less people are paying tax in the first place. The
Ooh, extra 70 quid a year. Brilliant, fantastic. Exactly what I wanted. That definitely didn't involve gutting all of our public services so much so that hundreds of thousands of people died.
economy, actually, compared to our European partners, was actually growing quite well until recently. As I mentioned before, the employment rate now is at the highest that it's been in a very long
That's
time.
not a good thing.
Of course it's a good thing. More
It
people
isn't.
in employment,
You've got too many
less
people
people unemployed.
who they're trying to drag out of like disability to go and do what? Slaughter pigs.
But do you,
It's,
do you understand why the government are trying to get people who left the workforce after COVID back into work? Do you understand why that's happening?
Yeah, please do.
Because it's actually
You know, Albie, who are actually being forced to apply
for
for jobs they have no qualifications for. I don't know if you actually do this. As a councillor, and having been a councillor for 16 years, I deal with this every day. People are forced to apply for jobs. I know what the jobs are because we get the stats from the job centre. I know what the jobs are they're waiting. Mostly they're skilled jobs or semi-skilled jobs. And the people who are jobless, unemployed, do not have the skills, but they have to keep on applying every day for jobs for which they do not have the skills, and they're not being trained to do them either. It's an absolute mess. It really is a mess. And there are people already having to do jobs which they're not qualified for and messing up and then feeling bad and depressed and so on. Depression related to what is going on around the country is horrific. And my God, we had it bad enough in North Kent already after Grenfell. But there are literally people on the edge right now who aren't going to make it through winter because they are hopeless. They have no hope at all. None.
Rishi has a problem in that he is, I believe, the richest MP in the House of Commons. It says in the Bible, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, you can say that's hyperbole, whatever, but he has a problem in that he is fantastically and fabulously rich because he married his incredibly rich wife, whose father is a billionaire who does business with Russia. Now, none of that looks good. And when you balance the real grinding poverty out there with this extraordinarily rich man saying everybody's got to do their bit to help the economy, it won't look good. Now, I want the guy as Prime Minister to succeed because I don't like living in a country which is becoming a joke. But
I do. I love being in a joke country. It's great. Like, as I said, we're fully on the spite pill arc now, and fully like the spite timeline has begun. As far as political policy is concerned at this point, and I like it when all of these people who spent their entire lives believing, Britannia rules the waves and we are the greatest country in the world, and clinging on to some kind of sense of some nostalgia for a colonial past that no longer exists, and thinking we're some kind of this brilliant, gigantic global player. Now, I'm glad that we're getting a bit of national embarrassment because these people need to get a dose of reality about where Britain exists on the global scale in 2022. We're not a massive player. We're just a small, insignificant, rainy island full of bigots. And there's no point fucking trying to sugarcoat it. And, you know, tough shit, mate. Tough shit. It's always been embarrassing.
I want the pound to be sound. I want us to get our good place back in the world. But he has a serious problem in doing all of these things. And the latest news is some of his cabinet picks. And one of them is he's picked
Suella Braverman for Home Secretary.
And that strikes me as that she is racist.
How is Suella racist?
In that she is her policy of, for example, she's in favour of sending people to Rwanda.
Is that a racist policy?
I think it is.
How is it racist?
I think it's racist because, and listen, it's difficult for me to argue this because I'm white and you're brown.
But it's not if you believe it,
Okay, good point, thank you. She is saying that people, many of whom are economic migrants.
The obvious answer to this question, right? Someone asks you, why is the Rwanda policy racist? You don't say, right? You don't say, well, it's clearly only being done to placate a bunch of people who don't want to see more brown faces in their town centres, right? That's the real thing, right? There's this kind of this dehumanizing way in which people view people crossing the channel as a consequence of the fact that they're refugees and the fact that they're brown. That's a simple fact of the matter, right? But the way you answer this question is the obvious reason that shows the implementation of the policy is racist as far as Suella is concerned, right? In that, we also have another refugee crisis that's going on right now, and it's called the war in Ukraine, right? And the people who come in as refugees from Ukraine, we hand them electronic visas that they can apply for online in France. They can hop on the Eurostar in Calais, end up in the UK, and then we'll put them up in a house with the Homes for Refugees scheme for Ukraine. If, for example, you're a brown person who's fleeing the war in Syria, or you're fleeing persecution in Iran, etc., etc., you don't get any of that. You don't get to have the online visa that you apply for as a refugee. You don't get to jump on the Eurostar and end up in London. So you're forced to travel on the boats to cross the channel. That is the reality, right? And there's a reason why it's the people in the boats coming across the channel who are the brown people are getting sent across to Rwanda, and the people who are getting given the visas and the Eurostar trips to come into London from Ukraine is because they're racist and they don't mind doing it for white people, yet they refuse to do it for brown people, right? And don't give me some in the comments later on, people watching this segment when don't give me the bullshit saying, oh, how about that's the proximity issue, right? Ukraine is part of Europe. They've only travelled across 4 countries rather than travelled across, Asia and then through Europe to get here, right? Why didn't any of the Asian migrants stay at a safe country that's on the route? First of all of the safe countries along the route have taken way more refugees than we have. Turkey up to 2 million refugees, for example, just from Syria alone. And second of all, why can't all the Ukrainian refugees stay in Moldova? Why can't they stay in Poland? Why can't they stay in Slovenia? Why can't they go and stay in France? Why can't they go and stay in any of these countries within Europe, yet we have to take them in? Why, if we have to take our fair, if you're saying, oh, we have to take our fair share of the Ukrainian refugees, why is there not an issue of taking our fair share when it comes to refugees coming across from the Middle East, for example?
And some are genuine refugees for political reasons of terror, whatever, are coming to Britain for sanctuary, that they are all to go to not a good place in Africa. And I've actually been to Rwanda, and it was 88, but it's not a good country at all. And
You see, there are people that would say that statement in itself is racist.
I mean, Paul Kagame himself was in charge of he was the defense minister for the Rwandan Patriotic Front during the First Congo War, in which he committed war crimes where he gunned down refugees in Kivu, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we're sending refugees to a man who has a proven track record of massacring refugees. That sounds like a less than ideal plan.
It's to say that Rwanda's this sort of African third world backwater, which is kind of how you're describing it.
Okay, well, so
I find that quite offensive as half African myself, actually.
Albi, I mean, I'll tell you what I did there, which was
in 1988.
Yeah.
2022.
But we were arguing earlier about, you were saying we're going to look at the future, and I think the future is formed by the past. But what I saw was Rwandan prisoners being dragooned to pick up dead bodies of Burundians from the river after a massacre in Burundi. This is not a happy place. Lots of
24 years ago.
But wait. Yes, I was there 24 years ago. There have been reports by a number of human rights charities saying that what happens in Rwanda is not good.
Also, if Rwanda is a good destination that's lovely, wonderful, the world full of, sunshine and rainbows, right? If Rwanda is this excellent country where there's no issues to be able to send people, why aren't we sending the Ukrainian refugees to Rwanda? If it's such a wonderful holiday destination that all of these quote-unquote economic migrants, were actually refugees coming from Syria, right? Because 70% of asylum claims from people who've come in small boats have been accepted once they've gone through the appeals process, right? 70% of these people are actually getting approved for asylum in the UK, which shows that the vast majority of these people are indeed genuine refugees and not economic migrants, as we keep being told that they are, right? Why are the Ukrainians not getting sent to Rwanda? Clearly. We all know they're both refugees, right? They're both fleeing war, fleeing persecution, right? But there's no room at the inn, right? We don't have enough room. We don't have the public services to deal with all the additional migration of people coming, staying as refugees, living on the dime of the taxpayer, right? Why don't we send the Ukrainians to Rwanda? And the reason why we won't send the Ukrainians to Rwanda is because they're white. It's the only explanation. Only explanation.
So I don't think your
If
time point...
if they were being sent to Sweden, would you have a problem?
But she wouldn't do that because
I have a
using...
problem. So I am ancestrally Irish, and my ancestors came to Britain because they were fleeing the potato famine. And I have a problem with anybody who says to economic migrants who are seeking a better life, don't come here. And I have a problem with that because, yes, it's difficult.
But if
and
they're
yes,
illegal migrants, do you not think that the country should do something about that?
As Gemma was saying, all of this is nuanced. All of this is nuanced, and we are still, whatever it is, like the 5th or 6th or 7th, the number keeps on dying, richest economy in the world. I have to say,
I can't believe that John's fucked up this answer so badly.
there aren't that many economic migrants who want to go to Russia or North Korea or China. Why is that? Because these are horrible societies. In a funny way, it's a compliment. People want to come to Britain. Now, how we deal with that is very, very difficult, and what it's led us to do is
well, that's another thing I like about it. People say, oh, they come here, they don't love our country. Well, they love the country enough to come here, traveling across from Syria, like over through Turkey, up into Greece and then Albania, and then taking boats from there, right? They love our country enough to travel across half the fucking world to get here. Surely that shows much more love than these people sitting in their pants watching daytime TV, getting angry at people for crossing the channel, right? Or, for example, people sitting in their suits in the boardrooms of the fucking 1922 committee saying, wow, we need to get rid of these people. These people don't love our country enough to be here. They're not, they wouldn't be proper patriots. They're just immigrants taking our country for a ride. Yeah, well, how about you go and, travel across multiple continents to get here first, and then maybe we'll talk about your level of patriotism or your dedication to Britain, fucking Tory MPs or whatever.
Ended up with this act of economic self-harm. But I do not think what Suella Braverman said in her previous existences as a cabinet minister was good at all, and I think that he's made a major political mistake in appointing that woman to that high office, where having an understanding of civilised tolerance for other people is absolutely baked into the job, and I don't think she's got that.
I completely agree, and I'm going to take the word racist out of it because it's so contentious.
Okay.
But what I will say is I think it's a vile policy. I think it's shameful. It flouts international law. And to tell me, oh, Rwanda's lovely. No,
I didn't say Rwanda's lovely.
You didn't.
I didn't say that.
No, okay. I apologise. I didn't put that way. But you were sort of intimating like she's chosen it as a deterrent. She's talking about it being a deterrent, which in itself is rank. And to sit there and say to the editor of The Telegraph, I dream with so much relish and glee, talking about people who are petrified, terrified people who have rubbish lives. They have fled where it is. And you know what, even if they're Albanian and they're economic migrants, well, I don't know what it's like to live in Albania and want so desperately to come and make more money. It's probably not great, right? So you're talking about human beings and this sort of othering taking so much joy from sticking them on a plane against their wishes. Human beings, like people traffickers, with people probably going, I don't want to go, I don't want to.
I mean, she's saying nothing incorrect here. She's right in everything that she's saying, but she's going to convince nobody.
Go scared to get off on that. It's sick in the head.
Right, so I thought some of the comments that Suella made at conference were a bit strange. The one that you're referencing is one of those comments that I thought...
Strange, were they? That's an interesting way of putting it. Yes, very, very strange comments from Suella.
Was strange.
I'm glad you think that as well.
But on the Rwanda policy itself, it's not a policy that I relish, but I can understand why it is in place, because ultimately, the small boats crossing the channel, thousands, I think 1,000 in a day at one point over the summer, is a big issue for a lot of Conservative voters.
And
I would
so it's not even about the utility. It's just our voters our voters are so racist we were forced to make the policy platform. That's it. He's just fucking admitted it. He's just literally admitted our supporters are too racist for us not to do this policy.
Alongside the deterrent, actually, not just a strong deterrent, but also, some proper cooperation with France and the opening of some safe and legal routes.
Yeah.
There needs to be deterrent and safe and legal routes.
Okay, I think that the devil is in the detail in this, as many of you have said. I thought Suella Braverman's comments were awful, relishing in this, and I don't love the Rwanda policy. The reason I don't love it is because I get the principle behind it. The principle I understand, and that is that if your goal is to stop the boats coming over, from France, incidentally, which is a safe country, but if you want to stop the boats coming over, if you look at places like Australia, for instance, where they stopped boats coming and processed them off Australia, their refugee crossings after a few years went to 0. Now, if you're trying to stop people traffickers making money and people dying in the Channel, then on that optic, it works. Australia is a demonstration that it works. The big flaw...
But there are still people in Nauru. In fact, the main reason why Australia implemented their offshore processing thing was because they wanted to be able to develop, the Liberal National Coalition wanted to develop they wanted to use it as a way of being able to funnel money from the central government, right, from the Treasury, into the pockets of private mates of the Liberal Party, because they hired private contractors of failing businesses to run the detention centres in Nauru that are now, strange enough, they're all businesses owned by people linked to the Liberal National Coalition, and their failing business is now doing really well whilst being flush with government cash. Strange that, isn't it? It's fucking wild shit, wildest shit. They stopped dying in boats because they started dying in camps, or true.
Or with it, and where I think it is discompassionate, is that what should have happened is, and what should happen if it is still implemented, is they negotiate with France and say, right, this is where you process if you are a migrant, if you're an asylum seeker. If you do not go via this route to this processing centre and you choose to cross the Channel, then the Rwanda policy
And why did the previous Conservative Prime Minister call the President of France couldn't be certain whether he's friend or foe?
Yeah, I agree with that. You won't get an argument from...
Do you know what Suella Braverman said about President Macron?
Which was?
She said he was absolutely a friend and then complimented him in French.
And then insulted Modi.
So fantastic.
So,
Emma, I'm going to just quickly bring Emma in. Go on.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Like, as I said, like, if they wanted to open a legal route, if they want to give people electronic visas that they can apply for in France and then make sure they can come across the Eurostar, like they do with Ukrainians, then, maybe that would undercut the business model of the people smugglers. But no, they don't want to do that because that's only for white people.
I want to talk a bit about this policy because I do think it's absolutely repellent to send people who come from unknown horrors, who want to escape. And we have a vast immigrant population in North Kensington, and I've heard all their stories, and some of them are absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. We've had people who were trafficked and tortured and everything. I've heard their stories because they tell me everything. Bless them. And I wouldn't want to send any of them anywhere. Why are we punishing people before they've been found guilty of anything? And these people, a lot of people are very, very vulnerable indeed, and we have a duty as decent human beings, surely, to look after people who are in need. Why, I think that the whole thing is an absolute disgrace. And I understand, they could be processed in France and so on. We have to.
And also, it's cheaper to just put them up in the UK, right, than it is to pay for the private company to go fly them to Rwanda and then also pay Rwanda to take care of them, right? Because it's not financially viable, it's humanitarian. On a humanitarian basis, it's utterly sickening. And from a policy platform basis, it's entirely racist, done with racist intentions. There is no positive to any of this shit, right? You know that it's only being done to satisfy racists because, I've just mentioned there, it's not economically viable as well as being kind of repugnant on a moral basis as well. There's the only justification is because you're a racist and you don't want brown people in the country. And it's simple as that.
Understand that they're being lied to by these traffickers. They're lied to. And they believe what they're told. They aren't suddenly going to, there's a nice shed over there and they'll be looked after and so on. The people, it's very, very powerful, which is run, it's an international gang, it's an international business network. It is indeed. And it's absolutely evil and they don't care and they will tell them anything. And they believe the people traffickers. They won't believe a shed full of British officials or whatever we might dream up. They will go with the people traffickers because they believe them and they lie. So, what are we going to stop? Are we going to stop the people trafficking? Who's like the top drug dealers? Or are we actually going to go further back and look at the countries where people are so terrified?
I mean, as we've already seen, for example, let's make a comparison like to the war on drugs, where we say, well, the only way to stop the illegal drug gangs that are happening is to clamp down as hard as we can, big deterrents, big punishments for people who are engaging it. Did it stop it? Did it fuck? All it did was make it more profitable for the people who are on the kind of the arse end of the law at that point, really. When you actually look at it, well, hang on a minute, let's just give people easy access to the things that they need to get out of addiction with regards to drugs. Let's decriminalise it like they have done in Portugal, and we'll see better outcomes on a utilitarian basis. But again, rightoids don't care about utility. They only care about following whatever certain set of rules has been placed in their head as to what they could theoretically are morally condoning or not. That's what it is, right? They believe drugs are bad, so they believe that you cannot have laws that are seen to be permissive of drug use, even if they don't lead to less drug use, and they don't lead to better outcomes for drug users. They don't care. All they care about is punishing the people they feel need to be punished, and that is just the worst part about conservative ideology. I absolutely despise it. They completely ignore like the utilitarian calculus that comes into these things. And the issue is issues with the migrant votes are exactly the same. The deterrent clearly hasn't worked. For example, people are still coming over. The boat crossings have increased since the Rwanda plan was announced, right? When the easiest answer is just open up the safe routes, make it easier to come in, get them processed, and then they can get them citizenship so they can join the workforce and be productive members of society and contribute to the fact that we have a massive labour shortage. It's really not difficult.
That they have to leave. Are we actually going to deal with that somehow? Because people are coming over here because life at home is intolerable.
The issue is, though, well, there's a few issues. Firstly, we are a very tolerant and welcoming country. Look at Ukraine. When we could physically see and we believed as a nation, because I think a big problem that we have in this country is we don't believe, rightly or wrongly, but if you look at the statistics, not every single person who is making that boat journey is fleeing a war zone. They're fleeing France, they're fleeing Albania, and some of them are exactly in the heartbreaking position that you describe. But when the British
70%, let's be real, that's the percentage of people that are getting accepted for their asylum claims.
public are confronted with people who are literally fleeing a war zone in Ukraine, and they know that they open up their own houses to them. So we cannot say that we are not...
But Christo, no.
What's the big difference, Christo? What's the big difference between Syrian refugees and Ukrainian refugees? Is it perhaps their skin colour?
Well, no, because they're coming...
What's interesting is the person who's defending the policy platform is the person who is now putting forward the argument that I made about why the policy is racist.
From France, and we don't know that they are Afghans fleeing a war zone.
But Christo, the British government was not as anything like as generous as the European Union. The European Union said to everybody who had a Ukrainian passport, they could live in the European Union for 3 years. The British government did not do that.
Oh, well, that's because we had that randy buffoon in charge. You know what I think of the randy buffoon.
By the way, the former leader of the Conservative Party is our version. And that is not good. So I would very much like the British government to follow the European Union's far better policy with refugees, as far as that is concerned. All of this is complicated, and all of this is difficult.
It's more clear-cut that they are refugees. That's
yes,
the point.
But at the same time, wouldn't it be better if we really, really helped the Ukrainians fight Vladimir Putin's killing machine?
Are we not doing that?
Why haven't we sent them a tank? Why aren't we sending them tanks? So the British tanks, I know they drive on the wrong side of the...
Oh, yes, let's just start full-on World War III, shall we, John? That sounds like an excellent answer. I can't with these people.
Road. The Ukrainians are smart people. They can handle tanks that drive on the wrong side of the road. It doesn't matter. Why haven't we sent them a tank? Why haven't we sent them proper aircraft?
So I think my understanding
the kind of awful stuff I've seen
my
again and
understanding
again.
about Ukraine support is that other than the United States of America, Britain has actually been the biggest contributor to the war effort, going much further and faster than your beloved European Union. So I think
no. So, for example, Estonia has actually given far more money than we have.
But that's because they basically border Ukraine, so it's much closer.
But however, you are right.
If we look at the graphs of aid that's gone to Ukraine after the United States of America, Britain is the biggest contributor to the war effort, and that's something we should all be proud of. So let's not be so critical of Britain all of the time. It's been really difficult listening to all of this.
Oh no, you can't say bad things about the country, because then you make the flag cry. No, if there's something bad, I'll criticise it. Like, we can't just ignore things because they belong to the country that you've sworn allegiance to.
In criticism
Afghan
of
refugees who
Britain.
came.
That's the opposite of patriotism, right? If you're patriotic because you believe that the country can never do any wrong and you can't criticise it, then you are not as patriotic as somebody who said, I love my country enough to make it the best it can be. I'm sorry, you're just not.
Who were
one of the most
working for
tolerant
the
countries
government
in
in
the world.
Afghanistan,
Look at the Hong Kong British
who were
National
working
Overseas Scheme.
for the British government in Afghanistan. We have, I think, 300 or 400 in our borough. These are people who, those who were able to get out. Some of them we left behind, we dumped them, didn't we? This was our mess. So people who've come over, who were working for the British government, and if they were to stay, they're either hiding or they're going to be killed. They know that, or their family. If their families are found and they can't find them, their families will be killed by the horrible situation that we left them in Afghanistan. So we've got 300 or 400 here. The difference between how the Ukrainians are welcomed and looked after, which is fantastic, and the Afghans is huge. It's absolutely huge. I know exactly what has happened. We get updates all the time. The Afghans are being moved out of hotels into temporary accommodation elsewhere, not just the nice temporary accommodation, little hostels and so on. You know, the difference between how we're looking after them. Now, what's that about?
And what do you think it's about? I know you're trying to say that it's racist, essentially, aren't you? Is that what you're saying? Right, I see. Well, I would disagree on that point.
Ukrainians.
Yes, it is. She's absolutely right. I mean, I'm glad it took this long to get to the point that I made right at the start.
Look,
English.
ultimately,
They look like us.
ultimately, I'm not sitting here saying that every
He can't even reason why he thinks it's not racist. He just says, well, I disagree. It's like saying, well, I disagree with the Supreme Court saying that it was illegal to prorogue Parliament. You can't just disagree. Unless you, like, first of all, I mean, Boris Johnson can disagree because it was literally the fucking law. And second of all, he's not given any response. I just disagree. Like, any reason for that? No, I just do. Again, it's typical rightoid shit.
single immigration policy or asylum-seeking policy that the Conservative Party has presided over has been a success. I think the withdrawal from Afghanistan, not just from the UK, by the way, but the whole of the NATO allies, was a complete disaster.
Including Joe Biden closing the airport.
Exactly.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
By the way, that's Donald Trump set the policy. So he said we're pulling out.
Yes, but Biden had 6 months to get it together.
It was so Donald Trump set the policy, and it made
Yes.
it very, very difficult. But there is a problem. There is a problem, and a massive problem, in that the people of Afghanistan didn't really want to fight for. And that's Nigel Farage attacking me right now. They didn't want to fight.
That's the Farage buzz.
They didn't want to fight for the government that the West kind of created for them, because there is a massive difference between ordinary Afghan society and how we think the world is, and that's a massive problem.
Well, Ashraf Ghani was corrupt as fuck. Is incredibly corrupt. Of course, they never want to fight for him.
Which, of course, was created originally by the Russians, by their evil invasion in 1979. The past determines.
Whoa. The Saur Revolution was in 1978. Nur Mohammad Taraki took charge with the PDPA before the Soviet Union invaded, right? Obviously, they installed Babrak Karmal in 1979, right? No one's disagreeing with him on that. But the idea that the culture that was created by the Soviet Union and not by the popular revolt of the Saur Revolution, that's nonsense.
The future. So, anyway, that's a big, big mess, and we should do better with that.
Or is it pronounced Saur Revolution? I don't know.
But it wasn't just Joe Biden's fault. I'm a massive fan of Joe Biden. I apologise.
And Albie, I find it really interesting. I understand what you're saying, and often, people on the sort of left of politics get told that they're being negative, or the Remain campaign was a negative campaign. Excuse me, everybody.
Well, it's the Farage
we'll
buzz again.
finish it up in a second. But I suppose I wanted to end by saying, actually, the Rejoin campaign has become a positive because the status quo was so much better than what we've got now. And I can think of another positive that we can end on. Jacob Rees-Mogg's gone.
Yeah.
Well, has he? Yeah. I kind of want to.
I think he's resigned.
How do you
Isn't the moderator supposed to be neutral?
feel about that? I mean, we're all, even you're supposed to be a Tory.
No, I don't love Jacob Rees-Mogg because of what the claptrap he spoke over Brexit, and I don't want the people who lied over Brexit particularly rewarded. I don't. I'd like good people to make the best of it, but not the people who lied.
Albie, just out of interest, did you vote for Remain or?
I supported Brexit in the referendum. Yes.
It's fine. Let's leave that there. And I tell you what, thank you so much.
Oh, again, you just. Oh god, a liberal's driving around the fucking bend. Just talk about policy platforms that got us to Brexit. It's like, oh, you supported Brexit, are you? Oh, I can't believe you have a different opinion to me. Oh god, fucking hell. Bloody liberals. Cannot deal with them.
So much. Sorry about the drill noises. You can tell we're live. But someone trying to get out. But that's all that we've got time for tonight. And I think it's been...
Okay, fair enough. Well, that was tedious, incredible. I thought Emma Dent-Coe did an excellent job. As I said, strange how, I think she'd make a great MP, but it's weird how we might not get her. She's not going to be one. really weird situation that we're in with Emma Dencode. But props to Byline TV for inviting her on, considering the issues with regards to the Kensington long list that she got excluded from, and her back in the public consciousness, and Byline TV gave her a platform. To be fair, that's, as Iron Mage was saying before, they may be liberals at Byline, but at least they have some principles, which is good. I mean, and she did really good performance. In fact, made the actual real points that we wanted to see, mentioning things like austerity, right? Mentioning things like Afghanistan, all that kind of stuff. She was clearly on the ball in the way that a bunch of the liberals on the panel really weren't prepared for. So I think we can get a good segment out of that. And also, that means future YouTube viewers watching this segment, please do indeed like, comment, and subscribe, or become a member for 99p if you feel like supporting me financially. That's the thing you can do, future YouTube viewers.